My name is Olivia, I am 29 years of age, and I've been with my partner, Tom, who is 35 years old, for over a decade now. We've shared 11 remarkable years together, weaving our lives so closely into each other's that separating feels as if I'm tearing apart a part of myself. Our journey together seems to be a series of beautiful memories sewn together into a tapestry, which is our shared life. Our relationship, one might say, was like a ship on calm seas. We've navigated through the gentle waves of everyday life without many bumps or storms, which is quite an achievement considering how often relationships can be like unpredictable weather. We might not have embarked on the adventure of parenthood, but we did make the big move into our first home in October 2024. Actually, we've been dwelling together since 2019, sharing spaces and lives while renting a cozy little place that became our first nest. Living together was a delightful extension of our partnership. In the beginning, we spent our days dreaming about the future while living at our rented place. Our new home represents the realization of those dreams. Walls that echo our laughter, rooms that house both our hopes and struggles, and corners that witness whispered dreams and occasional bickering. Household chores, shared dinners, and synchronized schedules became the rituals we nodded along with, even though our lives were occasionally finely tuned dance numbers that required compromise and a good deal of synchronization. My days started at dawn, with the sun kissing my cheeks as I headed off to my day job. Tom, on the other hand, would awaken later to slip into the twilight world with his night shift. It was a kind of romantic relay race, handing over spaces and stolen kisses in the hours that our paths crossed. It's an arrangement that could have easily led to misunderstandings or a feeling of absence, but somehow, we discovered the secret ingredients: trust, communication, and little notes left on the kitchen counter. These were carefully worded messages, like snippets of poetry crafted to say "thinking of you" without uttering a word. A simple text or an unexpected call bridged the gaps that tried to stretch between us due to our different schedules. True, we had disagreements. No sunset could dye every day in gold. Our arguments never seemed monumental, though. They were mere ripples on the surface of an otherwise tranquil sea of commitment and affection. We squabbled over the dishes left undone or the occasional slip of memory leading to an unremembered date. Those disagreements, however, never spilled over the edge into thoughts of separation. Neither of us let those sparks ignite a larger fire. You see, when I think of these years shared with Tom, I realize there was a balance, a kind of harmony between our individuality and togetherness. A subtle dance that we'd both learned step by step. No children shared our home, not yet at least, though the walls sometimes reverberated with the joyful noise of visiting nieces and nephews or the neighborhood's exuberant kids. Life in our own house felt like adulthood embracing us, and we embraced it right back. The commitments that some might have found stifling seemed to knit us closer amidst our daily balancing act of work and home life. There were rough tides from time to time, of course, unpredictable waves when news from the world outside our bubble swept ashore, but somehow, Tom and I found our way back to the calm waters. For us, security didn't mean an absence of challenges. Instead, it was a confidence in knowing that whatever we faced together. Time seemed to have been kind, allowing our relationship to grow deeper and richer every day. Looking back upon the 11 years we built, I see chapters filled with laughter, mutual support, and shared dreams. Every day was a new line in our manuscript, some written with applause and accolades, others penciled with tears. But isn't that the art of love? Creating and curating a life hand in hand, even when the ink threatens to run dry. Our story didn't end there, just as it hadn't when the storms of life first found us. We found ways to repair and reconstruct, to renew the vows whispered initially in youthful infatuation, but now reinforced with the touch of maturity. And although our schedules sometimes clashed, like the sun and the moon divvying up the same sky, we made it work, as all pairs carving a shared journey do. Until December 28th, before, the tranquil rhythm of our lives took an unexpected turn. My heart, which had always been sure and steady, began to pound with unease. Tom was supposed to be home by 6:30 a.m., just as he was after each night shift. I would rise early, prepare breakfast, and sometimes, if he was lucky, I might have saved a slice of cake from the previous night's binge baking session to sweeten his morning before he drifted into sleep. But on this particular morning, the house felt colder without him there to greet it. I texted him a simple inquiry about his whereabouts, expecting a quick and casual reply. However, my phone remained unnervingly silent. I told myself not to worry, he might be hanging out with friends for after-work drinks, or maybe an unexpected overtime had come up. It wouldn't have been the first time he'd foregone rest for the allure of friendly chatter or extra work. As the clock nudged forward, creeping past his usual arrival time, I prepared for my workday, fending off the unease threatening to unsettle my morning. I left the house in the crisp air of dawn, setting off to my 9 to 5. Tom remained curiously absent from both our home and my phone screen. Throughout the day, I was a hurry of distractions, tasks and meetings that should have absorbed my focus, but instead, my mind wandered back, each moment of silence louder than the last. I took a break at midday, hoping to hear his voice pick up on the other end of a call. But once more, there was nothing. No answer, only a repetitive ring reminding me of impending concerns. By late afternoon, anxiety began to unspool with a more insistent pull. Returning home at 5:00 p.m., I held on to the hope that I might find him sprawled out, caught in the deep sleep of a night shifter after an exhausting day. Yet, the house lay quietly undisturbed, no trace of Tom to be found. The dread that had been smoldering beneath my skin now transformed, flaring in earnest. Panic began to weave into my thoughts, the wild twine of worried imaginings beginning to escalate. Had he succumbed to some accident on his way home, the sort of tragedy my mind raced to envision but refused to settle on? With each unreturned call and unanswered text, the simplest solution, his safe return, seemed unfathomably out of reach. I reached out to his friends and family, working together in a temporary alliance of misinformation and hoping someone, anyone, might have reached him. Their voices, layered with both empathy and concern, offered no answers to match my questions. Finally, a contact from his workplace, one among those he had shared last night's festivities with, broke the silence that had become unbearable. The revelation was ordinary, yet arresting. Tom had offered to drive a female coworker home. Her name was KZ. They shared an acquaintance from work, but I never imagined this detail would swing the focus of our presence so intensely. KZ, when I managed to speak with her, assured me Tom only gave her a ride, and around 10 in the morning, he dropped her at her place. Afterward, she hadn't heard from him. I wanted to brush aside the alarms ringing in my mind, to honor the trust I had built with Tom over the years, yet despite my efforts to douse it, the flicker of suspicion lingered. I held no disdain for KZ, nor any of the women Tom called friends. Many times before, he'd indulged in social situations involving other women with my blessing. Yet, I found myself clinging to these threads now. They waved like pennants in the impulsive breeze of suspicion, signaling discomfort where once there was peace. Tom finally stumbled through the door at 9 p.m., a shadow of his usually composed self. The stench of alcohol hung heavy on him, turning the air thick and impenetrable as he staggered to the bedroom. I decided to let him sleep this mystery off, hoping that in the new day, a light might shine on the events that felt so shrouded, tangled in unwelcome doubts for a night longer. As he surrendered to the depths of sleep, I lay on tenterhooks beside him, waiting to unravel the knots. And silently, in the cocoon of our darkened bedroom, I let the tide of the night slowly drag us into the current of discovery that the dawn promised to bring. When morning cast its light through the curtains, I steeled myself for the conversation I knew we had to have. I watched him stirring awake, and as he returned to consciousness, the events of the previous day hung between us like a dense fog, unspoken yet palpable. "Tom," I began, striving for calm but not quite able to mask the shadow of worry in my voice. "Where were you yesterday? Who were you with?" Still groggy from sleep, he rubbed his face and sighed. "I was just out drinking," he answered, almost casually, "and my phone, I forgot to check it. You know how it is sometimes." His words felt like they bounced off me rather than absorbed, not quite aligning with the concern that had kept me awake. I nodded slowly, noting what he left unsaid more than what he claimed. "You mentioned being with your friends from work," I continued, my tone probing yet somehow keeping from outright accusation. "Yes, just the usual group," he confirmed, too quickly, with an ease that felt too practiced, too rehearsed. "And what about KZ?" I inquired. "You drove her home, right? Why not mention her?" There was a pause, a shift in the air as his eyes, no longer veiled by sleep, met mine. He hesitated, momentarily at a loss. "Yeah, of course. I gave her a lift," he said, somewhat defensive but not angry. "Like I said, her place was on my way." I wanted to believe him. I did, truly, but the seed of doubt that had been planted was stubborn. I felt like I was standing on the precipice of belief and skepticism, wearing thin from the inner battle each side waged. "A message would have been nice, Tom," I finally articulated, the hurt straining my voice more than I'd have liked. "Something to let me know you were okay." He reached for my hand, an olive branch offered with earnest eyes. "I'm sorry," he said, genuinely. "I didn't mean to worry you." The apology, though well-placed, hit a barrier built not just on this singular event, but on a series of choices that felt disrespectful. I withdrew slightly, emotion involuntary yet telling. "I think," I said, measuring each word carefully against my heart's undulating beats, "I need some space to think." His fingers slipped from mine, and in that small separation, a vast emptiness echoed. I didn't know then, how could I, that this decision would be definitive, a turning point we couldn't circle back on. At that moment, it felt like a sensible pause, a time to recalibrate alone rather than together. There were no tears, just resigned acceptance, which floated above our breakfast like a cloud refusing to dissipate. As he gathered his things, reticence making him seem smaller, our house felt like a different space completely. It was quieter, somehow emptier as he walked out, leaving behind a vacancy far deeper than the place he physically vacated. And just like that, an 11-year journey we thought would go the distance paused at a crossroad, uncertain of whether to converge again or if it was time to diverge onto separate paths. I hadn't planned it to end here, much less this way, but the path we'd been treading no longer felt true. Letting him leave, I stood alone, the heaviness of the moment sinking deeper into the corners of our shared home. After 3 months had slipped by, like pages in a book you glance through but never really comprehend, I was slowly carving out a new existence without him. Our decade-long relationship lingered around me like a ghost, both familiar and haunting, but I was managing to find my footing on my own terms. Little victories, like cooking dinner for one or sleeping diagonally across the entire bed, became monumental steps in reclaiming my independence. Yet, the universe has a peculiar way of intertwining lives, and just when I thought I had found a semblance of peace, it threw me an unexpected curveball. He had gotten into an accident, nothing too serious, thankfully, but it was serious enough to need some recuperation, both physically and emotionally. As soon as I heard, my heart, as much as I had willed it to be cold and guarded, couldn't help but thaw, inch by inch. He reached out, asking for my help, and admittedly the old familiar script we'd once lived in together came rushing back. I found myself supporting him, helping him through his recovery, my defense mechanisms momentarily downed by his vulnerability and the tendrils of our old connection. In those days of healing, he confessed, between labored breaths and tired smiles, that he'd made mistakes, monumental ones, and how deeply sorry he was for making me feel unseen, unheard, and unimportant. As the days turned into weeks, the boundary between what once was and what I had begun to build started to blur. It was so easy to slip back into those rhythms of comfort, nostalgia, pulling at my strings like a puppet master's deft hand. The stories we used to create together seemed to have a stubborn persistence on the fringes of my mind, and eventually, he asked if we could try again. I forgave him, or at least a part of me willed itself to believe that forgiveness was possible, even if only to extinguish the disquiet in my mind. He promised that history would not repeat itself, that elusive assurance that things, would be different. Fast forward a month into our newly rekindled union, a gossamer bridge fashioned from promises and hope, only to find that certain patterns are hard to break. When it came to light that the first person he reached out to after his accident was not me but this coworker, AZ, cracks began to appear. His explanation, though plausible, left a bitter taste. After all, I knew our roots should have been the first he turned to for strength. I accepted his words, once again opting to lay my skepticism aside in favor of maintaining the fragile peace we'd begun to sketch together. But somewhere inside, the fissure spread, pulling apart at the seams of shaky trust we had hastily sown. Yet, despite all the doubts, something inside kept willing this fractured story to continue, even if only for the hope that it was not too late to rewrite the ending. I found myself bracing once more for the potential of what could be, longing for that seamless connection we once shared, but the very nature of our dynamic seemed to defy that possibility. As if testing the tensile strength of our renewed bond, it did not take long for history to cast its shadow upon us again. 1 month passed, and with it came a familiar darkness. He went out the whole day without so much as a text message or a phone call. When he finally returned, we erupted into yet another argument, the acrid taste of resentment swirling in the air like smoke from a burning ember. Our voices danced in crescendos, reaching heights and depths I could barely take. In the heat of our confrontation, he diverged from the path of reconciliation we had promised to tread together. He walked out, leaving a trail of emotional wreckage in his wake. But this time, unlike before, he did not disappear into the ether for days. He returned the very next day. The relief of his presence was short-lived, quickly overshadowed by the dread of what I might find. Against my better judgment, I let curiosity guide me through his digital footprints, searching for answers. My heart pounded as I scrolled through his recent contacts, revealing his recurring communication with AZ. They had talked extensively in my absence, and the conversation lined with unwelcome familiarity gnawed at the fringes of whatever fragile trust was left. When confronted with my discovery, his explanation was once again a refrain I had grown weary of hearing. He lacked others to confide in, to share his burdens with, and he found solace in his exchanges with her. This time, though, his words could not patch the gaping hole left in the wake of our frayed trust at its whittled core. After collecting enough anguish in my heart, realization dawned with shimmering clarity. Love should not coexist with unending uncertainty. It was here that I finally drew the line and broke up with him again, feeling an unfamiliar blend of heartache and liberation welling up inside, like a storm pulling down the last barriers holding back the sea. In moments of solitary reflection, I began wrestling with the gnawing question, was this a betrayal? Peering through every conversation, it was plain they were merely friends, nothing more, with friends at his workplace assuring me of their innocuous bond, devoid of physical intimacy. But her presence in conversations, like the persistent sound of rain on a tin roof, planted seeds of doubt. In those small hours of the night, stillness gave way to insecurities growing wild and untamed. My heart, an entity torn by love and distrust, felt as if it was being tested at every turn. I wondered if there truly was nothing where she and he intersected, yet the looming shadow of yet loomed large, pressing heavily against the walls of my mind. Could my fears stem from nothing more than baseless insecurity, or was my intuition hinting at something premonitory? Struggling with this heartache, I sought clarity beyond my conflicted emotions, fearing love and insecurity were blurring my vision irrevocably.